The kicker was when my mom started feeling like something was climbing into bed with her. People who used to not believe in ghosts but do now, what experience changed your mind? When I was about 10 to 14 I had terrible insomnia. I would imagine things and felt incredibly unsafe as though I was being watched, although I never admitted this to anyone. I began only sleeping on the couch, with my back against the wall, and had to have the TV or some sort of light on. I missed an immense amount of school because of this, so my mom had me see a neurologist. The neurologist diagnosed me with some things, but the crazy part was, during my sleep study I slept amazingly well, no issues at all, and slept in the real bed. Eventually I got transferred to a children's hospital, and speaking to the doctor I explained I would see things and felt uncomfortable. They had thought I was experiencing sleep paralysis. When they told my mom, she went ghost white. She pulled me aside and explained she was experiencing things, too. She described in detail what I was seeing. That evening she approached my brother and asked broad questions: "Do you have anything weird happen in home?" etc. He also described what we experienced. It was then I realized we must have paranormal activity, and I've believed it ever since. When we moved out of that house all my sleep issues abruptly stopped and I haven't experienced it since. I still don't believe in ghosts. But I did have a strange experience. I had a cat who I found in a ditch many years ago. She was cute and I pet her, so she followed me back down the train tracks about a mile to my home. I opened the door for her and she went in. She was offered the opportunity to go back out, and did for a moment, but then came back in. She was mine forever. I've had many pets over the years and loved them all. But this one was different. She wanted to be near me all the time. I'd often said I'd never had a cat who made me feel like my personal space was being violated before. She followed me up to bed every night and purred me to sleep. She died fairly quickly. I barely even had a chance to say goodbye. I knew she was ill, having been diagnosed with hyperthyroidism, which cat owners will know is not a good thing to hear. They vomit their food up and waste away slowly, eventually succumbing to either congestive heart failure or kidney damage. She had taken a turn for the worse and I thought her treatment wasn't working. On examination, they found tumors in her stomach and liver. She had been dealt a mortal blow and was only going to suffer harder and harder. In the most painful one I've ever had to deal with, I put her down and she even meowed one last time before the end. I forgot to mention that this cat was also the most talkative I've ever had. She frankly wouldn't shut up. I buried her in the yard to keep her close and tried to go to sleep, completely beside myself with grief. As I lay down, I heard something familiar. I live in an old house and my bedroom doesn't have a door, so I installed one of those plastic sliding doors. The slats it's made of make a telltale clacking sound when they're disturbed, like they did when a cat pushes in between them and the door frame. I heard this, and a moment later, I felt the foot of my bed compress, and could feel the mattress deform around my feet, up beside my legs and roughly to my hips. I looked. No cat. I don't know how to explain this. I don't believe in ghosts and I'm sure grief can cause some pretty significant psychological disturbances. A quick perusal of my post history will very quickly show I am anything but cuddly, but I was absolutely in the kind of deep grief where one would expect it, as I love the cat more than basically anything else. Even typing this now, years later, is making my eyes well up with sadness for my lost friend. I could write off the sound of the plastic slats as a breeze or a hallucination. Older members of my family said they saw my father after he died, and I've read about grief-induced hallucinations before. But to feel my mattress deform like that, in exactly the way she used to circle my feet and come up beside me, I don't know what to think. I'm still not sure if I believe in ghosts, but there have been some weird things in my life that I can't explain. When I was 5 years old, I woke up in the night and my grandma was standing at the end of my bed, wearing a teal blue skirt and a matching blouse. I remember that it was summer and the sky was still light but not light enough for me to read, so I guess it was about 9 p.m. I sat up, she put her finger to her lips and I rubbed my eyes a couple of times, 'cause sleepy, and when I looked back she was gone. I just snuggled back under my covers thinking how nice it was to see her because I hadn't seen her for ages and I hoped she would still be there when I woke up. Next morning, my house was eerily quiet. My mum was in a worse mood than normal, but she had been crying, so I asked her what was wrong. My grandma died the night before. She had been crossing a road after her bingo turned out, at 8:30 p.m., about 60 miles away from where we lived. She had a massive brain hemorrhage in the middle of the road and didn't even make it to the other side, let alone to my house 60 miles away. She was wearing a teal blue skirt and matching blouse. Most of my family is extremely religious and believe in ghosts wholeheartedly. Most of them claim to have seen something paranormal at some point in their lives. I wasn't very religious, and I always thought to myself, if I haven't seen it, then it's not real. That changed during my senior year in high school. I was dog-sitting at my great-aunt's house while she was out of town for a few days. A little after midnight, I'm watching a movie and my aunt's dog starts barking like crazy and runs up the stairs at full speed. The dog was small, but fierce. Suddenly, I clear as day heard a gravelly voice at the top of the stairs say "Bad doggy." The voice was deep and masculine. I went upstairs because I was certain nobody else was supposed to be there. I looked around and there was nobody in sight. The dog was still barking at something that I couldn't see. She was just barking at an empty hallway. That's when I heard footsteps walking away from us down the hall and into my aunt's bedroom. I could hear the footsteps, but I couldn't see anybody making them. I noped the hell out of that house with the dog, and went outside in my car. The dog and I slept there for the night. I'm not entirely sure what the hell I experienced that night, but I definitely believe in the paranormal now. I never told my aunt about what happened, but apparently my great-uncle, her husband, had died in that house a few months after I was born. I never knew him, but I'm willing to bet that it was him who I heard that night. I was visiting my mother after my dad died. She went shopping with her sister and left me alone. I heard my dad as plain as day up in his room. He got up from his computer chair, walked over to the door and opened it. He walked down the stairs and stood on the last step for a few seconds before walking back up to his room and closing the door. I was probably 5 feet from him in the living room. I just froze. It scared the hell out of me. When I was in 5th grade I was playing with silly putty in my room when my mom called me down for dinner. I had molded it into a ball and placed it down directly behind me. I'm talking as soft as can be here. When I stood up to go downstairs, I felt something hit me in the back of my head with some force. So I turn around and see my silly putty ball, not on the ground anymore, but bouncing on my windowsill until it eventually rolled back onto the floor. Needless to say, I ran downstairs hysterically trying to tell my mom what had happened. My wife and I swear that our daughter used to talk to ghosts when she was a toddler. She was an only child at the time. First instance I remember was her telling me that she was talking to Nana. That's what I called my grandmother, who passed about 15 years before my daughter was born. My daughter was young and so I hadn't even talked about Nana to her, so I showed her a picture and asked who she spoke to. There were 4 women, 3 of which I didn't even know, but without hesitation she pointed to my Nana. Okay, no biggie. Some months later, my wife and I are trying for baby number 2. After my wife gets pregnant, my daughter is sitting next to her on the couch and puts her head on her belly and says, "Mommy, there's a baby in there." Okay, maybe that's coincidence. She overheard us saying something. A few weeks later, my wife miscarries. Maybe my daughter picked up on our sadness, who knows, but she again puts her head on her stomach and says, "Mommy, there's no baby in there anymore." Then, several months and one more, very early, miscarriage later, my daughter tells us, "I was talking to my brother last night and he said that my sister is coming to live with me soon." Again, she's an only child and had no living brother. We were still trying at this point, but had not taken any tests. We picked one up that night, and sure enough, pregnant. When time came to reveal the gender, I wasn't even interested. My daughter had already said it was a girl. Sure enough, I have 2 daughters. When I was in my late 20s I was dating my girlfriend, soon-to-be wife. We had been together for a while. One summer, July 3rd, her sister was abducted and killed by a group of 6 men. All the men were eventually caught and trialed. The trials and the aftermath for the family were devastating and debilitating for them for many, many years. Fast forward 3 months, after the funeral, I arrived at my girlfriend's house to wait for her to get off from her job as a nurse at a local hospital. Neither of her parents were home, just me, alone in the house. So I went into the family room, turned on the TV, sat down on the couch, got comfortable and began to watch. Clear as a bell I heard my girlfriend's sister's voice in my right ear, just off my shoulder, call my name. I turned to look at the seat next to me and of course there was nobody there. I stared at the spot in the couch next to me for a long while. Feeling a bit uneasy, I turned off the TV and went outside to wait on the porch. I lived in a haunted house for basically all of my life. It used to scare the heck out of me when I was little, but I basically just got desensitized to it. We always experienced hearing footsteps, Voices upstairs when everyone was downstairs, dogs following nothing around the room. Typical ghost stuff. Some of the stranger experiences include my grandma seeing her mother in her room at night. My mom seeing a ball of light floating in our hallway. My brother and I separately heard fingernails tapping on the walls of our bedrooms, and when we called our mom in to listen, the sounds would stop, then as soon as mom left it would start again. We experienced this at different times, my brother for a week or so and then me, and without knowing that the other one was having the same experience. I had a desk toy in my room that had a little foam ball hanging from a chain on it. My cousin and I were playing video games and the ball randomly bounced like someone had tapped it from below. The kicker was when my mom started feeling like something was climbing into bed with her. She describes it as like a dog trying but failing to climb up on the foot of the bed. She thought it was my dad moving his feet, but then she felt it when he wasn't there and she was wide awake, so she knew it wasn't him. She kept this story to herself and then a few days later my uncle stayed the night in the guest room and described feeling the exact same thing. At that point my mom waited for a day that everyone was out of the house. She opened up the windows and told the spirit that it either had to leave and move on, or it wasn't allowed to bother us anymore. Since then we've gone from activity every day to one of experiences every few months. We've been told by several people, who have slept in the guest room and had nightmares about it, that there is a portal in the closet of our guest room. Sometimes I think that spirits just pass through occasionally and cause a flurry of activity. My aunt used to live above a convenience store. It was a duplex and had a mud room that connected the front doors to each apartment. The other apartment was empty and unlocked, so my cousins and I would hang out in there. One night we are playing hide and seek in the empty apartment. My cousin and I are running from the seeker and the hallway door shut in front of us. We freak out and end the game because we are too scared. We tell our parents and my aunt happens to have a night vision baby camera. She sets it up in the living room of the empty apartment and we can all see it on the TV in her house. We are watching it for about 10 minutes, dust is flying everywhere and nothing is happening. Out of the darkness, a Pepsi can rolls up and hits the base of the camera. Everybody is like, what the hell, this place is haunted. I never went up the stairs alone to get to her house again, I was too freaked out. About 3 years ago, the entire building burned down. Unfortunately, I don't know the cause. Thanks for listening to Radio TTS, hit the subscribe button for more videos like this. And remember, so many people have experienced supernatural things, so who knows, maybe ghosts exist. Maybe there is a ghost in your room, right now, staring at you.